Am I recording? It says I'm recording. Okay. So we're going to finish up 3.4 today. And we're going to talk about, so 3.4 and 3.5, which deal with percentiles and box and whisker graphs. Okay. Now, hopefully I'm recording. You know, I'm going to do a quick test just to make sure. No, it looks like I'm recording. Okay. All right. So let's talk about the 5-number summary. The 5-number summary consists of 5 numbers: the minimum, the maximum, the median, and then we call it, I always call it Q1 and Q3. Q1 stands for quartile 1, Q3 stands for quartile 3. So basically quartile 1 is the 25th percentile, quartile 3 is the 75th percentile. The median sometimes is called Q2, that would be the 50th percentile. We've already talked a little bit about medians, right? You guys kind of understand how that goes. And then let's also talk, so that's your 5-number summary. Okay, we also have what's called the IQR, which is the Interquartile Range, which is basically IQR equals Q3 minus Q1. And we can use this information to find outliers. We need to find the upper fence and the lower fence. Okay. The upper fence equals Q3 plus 1.5 times the IQR, and the lower fence equals Q1 minus 1.5 times the IQR. Okay. So let me draw one more thing here. And that is what we can basically call a box and whisker diagram. Okay. So this is basically kind of a generic box and whisker diagram. So this is the box, these are the whiskers. Okay. So as we look at this, the end of this generally represents the minimum or the lower fence. Okay. This line here represents Q1. This line here represents Q2 or the median. This line here represents Q3. And then this represents either the maximum or the upper fence. Okay, now let me just preface this with a few things. There are more than one way to draw a box and whisker diagram. I'm going to show you my method, which may or may not be slightly different than the book. Actually, it is slightly different than the book. So I'm going to use either the maximum or the upper fence and the minimum or the lower fence, whichever one applies. Okay. The 5-number summary is always this. We base our box and whisker diagram on this. The question is the whiskers, basically. So when I ask for the 5-number summary, I always want the minimum and the maximum. When I ask for a box and whisker, I either want the minimum or the lower fence or the maximum or the upper fence if it applies. Okay. In the book, what I think they do is they do the second highest and the second lowest. Okay. So I would rather use the fences than that, but it's not wrong. But this, here, I'm going to say it this way. This is what I want you to use. Okay. So I'm going to deviate from the book just a little bit. I would rather you use the upper fence or the lower fence if it applies. So if there are no outliers, you use the minimum and the maximum. If there's an outlier on the low side, you use the lower fence. If there's an outlier on the upper side, you use the upper fence. Does that make sense? Question.
Is there a specific way to do it? Like, do we do it horizontally or vertically?
So it doesn't matter whether they're horizontal or vertical. Excel makes them vertically, and so that's what I'm going to focus on. But if you did it horizontally, that wouldn't be wrong. So now another thing. Well, let's think about this. Okay, so let's talk about some outliers. So go ahead and open up in Canvas. Oh, I forgot, I can't use that. I've got a spreadsheet here. Oh, I need to share this. The spreadsheet is going to be 3.3, yes. Share my screen. Yeah, that works. So if we go in here to assignments, go to the bottom, in class worksheets, worksheet 3.3. Okay, so you remember okay, here we go. All right, so these are a random sample of 18 collision claims. Okay? Now, one of the things that we should refer to, I'll write this on the board really quick. This is what we refer to as order statistics, which means you need to sort, usually ascending. Okay? So the first thing we're going to do with our data here is we're going to sort our data. So go ahead and enable editing. I can't use the mouse, I got to remember to do that. So if you go over here to data, and then if you select the A to Z, that will sort your data lickety-split. Okay? All right, so now let's pick on, yes, how about you? You got a question. Tell me your name. Sean. What's your question? 3.3. Okay, and can you see, here, I'll turn out the light. Can you see that board good enough? Do you want me to make it bigger? You people who sit in the back and can't see the board, I don't know what you're thinking. Can you, what do you think the minimum is? Sean? 180, that's your minimum. What do you think the maximum is? 21,000 max. See, these are easy. Okay, now you remember, maybe that's a little too big. Let's put these back. Okay, do you remember how to find the median manually? What's that? Oh, he's going straight for the computer, equals median. How would you find it by hand? Okay, so how many data points do I have? Hints in the top. You don't have to count. Got 18, right? 18 plus 1 is 19. 19 divided by 2 is 9.5. Okay, so I'm going to count to 9.5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.5. So I'm going to highlight those. And so it's going to be in between those. So my median will be the mean of those two numbers, right? So my median works out to be 1802. So as I'm doing this, my minimum's 180, my maximum's 21,147. My median is 1802. Okay, so I'm trying to decide if I should follow the book here or if I should diverge. I'm going to diverge for just a little bit. So the question is, when we're doing this by hand, we like an odd number, right? So the question is, do I include the median or do I not? And here's what my answer today is going to be. I think the book is slightly different, and I might change to the book. But for visual purposes, I'm going to try to keep this simple for you. Do whatever it takes to make the number odd. Okay? So here, in this case, do I include the median or do I not? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If I include that part, 9, that becomes an odd number, right? 9 plus 1 is 10. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So I'm going to count to the fifth one down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That number just became quartile 1. Okay? Basically, it's the median of the top half of the data. Does that make sense? And I think the book is a little different, and I haven't decided if I want to follow the book yet, but I just want to keep this simple for now, okay? And we'll do another method in a minute, and you'll see we'll get a different answer. Yes? I want the sample size to be odd, the n. Remember, your median is n plus 1 divided by 2, okay? So if it's odd, odd plus 1 is even, even divided by 2 is a number, okay? So now I'm going to do the same thing here. I've got 9, so I'm going to count down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That gives me 4668. This is my Q3. And I wonder if this is the guy. It is. Just one second. Hi, this is Rick. You did? Yeah, I didn't call about a survey. Okay, bye. All right, I don't know what that was about. Okay, so Q1, Q3. So here's my 5-number summary: 180, 735, 1802, 4668, and 21147. Okay. So, all right. So, if I ask you for the 5-number summary, this is exactly what I would ask for. Now, we've got a computer here. We can use the computer. Sean already started with that a little bit here. So another way I could do this, if you were going to come up with a command for the minimum, I'll try to make these kind of line up a little bit. What do you think the command for the minimum would be? Oh, I forgot your name. I was just going to say it. Ramiro, isn't it? Oh, I got it. Good. Ramiro, what do you think? What would be a good command for the minimum? Equals min. How about that? Okay. So then you can highlight all your data just like this. And close your parenthesis, and look at that. It gets the same value. If you were doing the maximum, what command would you use, Kyle, for maximum? Equals max. Okay, we'll highlight all of this data. Okay, Sean already gave us the command for the median, equals median. Okay, let's see if we get the same median here. We did. How about that? Now, if you were going to come up with a command for the first quartile, Ashley, what command do you think you'd use for quartile? Equals what? Oh, that's close. How about equals Q? Oh, look at that. Okay, now I've got 3 here. Maybe I'll put a QU so you can kind of see that. Okay, A, QUA. Okay, so I've got 3 commands here. One, EXC, that excludes the median. One includes the median. This one doesn't specify, but it actually includes the median. Okay. The third one is the one I'm used to using, and that's the one I'm going to use. Although the second and the third one will give you exactly the same number. They're basically the same command. I'm going to use the plain old quartile. Okay. Now this one's a little trickier to use. Notice here it tries to walk you through, and it says array. Array means your data. Okay. So if you go over here and you highlight your data, okay, just like this, then you press a comma, and then it asks you, well, which quartile do you want? Now, you could actually use this for all 5 numbers. So 0 is your minimum, 4 is your maximum. We want the first quartile, so I'm going to put a 1 here. Okay, now, because I'm using the computer method, it's going to use a different method, so I'm going to get a slightly different answer. And I'm going to close my parenthesis. I'm going to copy, or do that. It gives me the value 751.75. Okay, so it's a different method. This one probably follows the book closer, and I'm thinking about changing it, but I didn't read it before class, and I'm going with my numbers, okay? Plus, I wanted them to be a little bit different because I wanted to show you how to draw a box and whisker with 2 different data sets. Yes?
Which value?
That's a great question. So which way can you do this? So here's the deal. On the quiz tomorrow, I'm going to ask you to do this manually, and so I want you to do method number 1. If it's a computer test, you can do method number 2. Okay? So I want you to know both methods.
But if you end up using, for example, the test method 1,
No, if it's a paper test, I want you to do the paper method, where you count down odd number, divide by 2. If it's on the computer, then you can use this. Okay? So I want you to know both methods. So the quiz tomorrow, you need to know by hand. The test, I don't know if it's going to be next week, but whenever it is, it might be. We might have a short one, especially since you guys ran out of time. So by the way, did you notice that I curved your scores just a little bit? Okay, I really apologize. Apparently, it was a Canvas outing, and it was like our entire class, and the next class had no problem walking in. So I apologize, but that was why I curved the scores. But you guys, actually, the funny thing, I should have showed you. If I had not curved your scores, it would have been a perfect bell curve. But I was like, well, that was kind of mean. It wasn't my fault, but I took off 5 points for the computer part since you guys really got crunched on time. So anyway, so then it was skewed towards the A's and B's. I'll show you that graph sometime. All right, now Q3, it may be tempting to copy that formula, and let me show you. This is actually going to give you the wrong answer, but we could fix it here in a minute. So if I copy this and paste it, those numbers are way off, right? Okay, now let's look at here. If I go here to edit, look what happened. It's only counting from 1953, plus it's got a bunch of blank spots at the bottom. So it's actually got the wrong range. So you can actually fix this if I erase this here, and if I highlight my data just like this, now it should be closer to 4668. And in fact, oh, now it's exactly 751.75 because I forgot to change. I don't want the first quartile. I want the third quartile. 4366. So it's pretty close. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. All right. So those are the 2 methods, the computer and the paper method. They are going to give you slightly different values. Okay. Now, the good thing about doing this random sample of 18 collision claims is, oh, actually, that's not what I'm talking about. The good thing about using my laptop is you guys get to see the difference here. Now, there is a histogram maker on the version of Excel you have, but there is not a histogram maker on the Excel version that I have. And plus, I want you guys to get used to doing this a little bit manually. So I'm going to use my method because I can't show you how to do it the other way. Okay? So here's how we're going to do this. Okay? So on my version of Excel, let me back up a little bit. So let's say that it's similar to yours, okay? So you're going to go to Insert. I'm going to click on Other Charts. So you probably don't have an Other Charts. You've got like a spider web looking thing but here. But then I'm going to pick the stock market chart here, and I'm going to do this on purpose here. It says Open, High, Low, Close, okay? Now yours is slightly different, but this is going to give me an error message, okay? This error message I'd like you to read here. It says you must put it in this order: open, high, low, close. But it also says use dates, and then it says or stock names. Don't use stock names; it won't work. Okay. So here's what this is telling you. I need the word date, open, high, low, and close. Okay? In that order. Now, not only do I have the word date there, I need a date there. It can be any date that you want. I'm going to pick January 1st and January 2nd. Okay? Pick consecutive dates. If I pick January 10th, there's going to be a big gap in my graph, so don't do that. Okay? Now, the high is going to be, oh, actually, before I do this, I'm gonna take a break for a minute. The question is, do I have outliers? That's what I really want to ask. Do I have outliers? Okay. Now we need to figure out how we want to come up with kind of a mathematical way to say, how do you decide something is outlier? The other day we did something with Michael Jordan, and it seemed clear that Michael Jordan was an outlier. But what about data like this? Maybe it's not so clear. Okay. So how do we do that? So the first thing we need to do is find our interquartile range, IQR. So in this case, my IQR equals Q3 minus Q1. So if I do this with the by hand and the computer method, these are going to be slightly different. So by hand, I'm going to get Q3, which is this number, minus Q1, which is this number. With the computer, I'm going to use this number minus that number. Okay, so my IQR is going to differ based on whether I'm doing the computer method or the by hand method. Okay, what's that? Equals quartile. Okay, all right, so now the idea here is, I'm going to go back to my picture here for a minute. What percent of data should I have on this whisker? I should have 25% of my data. What about from here to the median? 25%. From the median to Q3, 25%. And from Q3 to the maximum, 25%. So how much data should I have in my interquartile range? 50%. Okay? So the idea here is, let's take Michael Jordan for an example. Okay, we know that he was an outlier. If I take, so normally I should only have 25% of my data. Well, let's be super safe and let's double that to be 50%. So if I go from the Q1 50%, and if I still have data beyond that, that's an outlier. And vice versa, if I go Q3 and if I go 50% higher than that, and if I have data beyond that, whatever that data is, that's an outlier. Does that make sense? Because I'm only supposed to have 25%. So I'm actually taking the interquartile range and I'm going to multiply that by, or I'm going to double that. Okay. So if it's a number beyond that, well, it's clearly an outlier. Okay. Does that make sense? So the idea here is, let's do 1.5 times 1.5. So if I take this number and if I multiply it times 1.5, that's going to give me that, and that's going to give me that. Okay, so now I'm going to do my lower fence and my upper fence. And so we're going to try to decide if we have outliers. So if I take this number here, my lower fence, if I'm doing this by hand, is going to be my Q1 minus 1.5 times my interquartile range. Okay, so these are random collision coverage claims. Would it make sense for you to get in a wreck and for the insurance company, or for you to have to, let's see, that would be a negative claim, okay? So this is how much it costs. So would it, I was gonna say, would it make sense for the insurance company to pay you to get in a wreck? Sometimes they kind of do that, but yeah, it wouldn't make sense, right? So is 180 an outlier? If negative 5,000 is my lower fence, no, it's not an outlier. My upper fence, I'm going to take Q3 plus 1.5 times my interquartile range. So it says my upper fence should be 10,567, What do you think? Is that number higher than 10,567? Yes. So is 21,000 an outlier? It is. Okay, so I'm going to highlight that. This one here is an outlier. Okay, highlight that in orange. Okay, now let's do it again, this time with the computer method. Okay, I'm going to use, instead of 735, I'm going to use 751 because that's what I did for my computer method. Minus 1.5 times that, my interquartile range, that gives me a negative 5,000. Do I have any lower outliers? No. Now I'm going to do Q3 plus 1.5 times my interquartile range, gives me 97.88. Ooh, look at this. Is this an outlier now? So this one gives me, so because I used a slightly different method, this becomes an outlier. And what about 99.08? Is 99.08 an outlier? Yes, it is. Okay, so by hand here, I have one outlier. Using the computer, because I'm using slightly different calculations, I've got 3 outliers. They are, in this case, 21,147 and 10,034 and 99.08. What's that?
The upper fence again, because I got that it was 10,089.
Okay, so remember here, you're using the Q3, which is 4366, plus 1.5 times your interquartile range, which is that number there, 97.88. The lower is Q1, which is the 751, minus 1.5 times your interquartile range. Oh, I did it wrong, didn't I? Yeah, that's better. Okay, sorry, I did it wrong the first time. This is the right way to do it. Okay. All right, now I want to learn how to make a box and whisker diagram. Okay, so I started doing that already. I've got my dates here. Okay, now my high, okay, so here, this is the question. Your high is either going to be your maximum or your upper fence. Depends on whether you have an outlier. Do I have outliers? Yes, so do I use the maximum or the upper fence? I use the upper fence. Okay, so the by hand method, I'm going to use the 10,567. Okay, if I'm using the computer method, I'm going to use the 97.88. Okay, does that make sense? On the low side, okay, on the low side, I either use the minimum or the lower fence. Do I have outliers on the lower end? No. So which number do I use? The minimum. So in this case, I'm going to use the minimum because I do not have lower outliers. So this is going to be 180. This one also is going to be 180. Okay. Now the open is going to be your Q1 and your close is going to be your Q3. Okay. So my open is going to be, this is the by hand method, 735. The computer method is going to be 751. And the close method is Q3. So that's going to be 4668 by hand, or it's going to be 4366 on the computer. Okay? Does that make sense? Now I'm going to highlight my data, just like this. Okay? And make sure you include those labels. If you don't, it won't work. And it will give you that error message and you'll be like, what did I do wrong? So now you're going to go Insert. You're going to go to Other Charts. You're going to go to Stock Market Chart. Okay? Now, in this case, this isn't really a stock market. Now, by the way, when I started teaching this class, this was all the options I had. There was no box and whisker maker. So you had to do it this way. Now, I always tell people to get rid of the open, high, low, close. And I'm going to tell you, even though there is a box and whisker maker, I still want you to do it this way. If you use the new method, when I pull up your test, it's going to say can't read the graph. I will therefore know you used the wrong method. What's that? Stock market graph. It's the second one. Okay. and I won't give you any points, okay? So use this method. Plus it gets you used to, it helps you understand how the 5-number summary is related to the box and whisker diagram, okay? Now, here's the problem. Keep forgetting I can't use that mouse. Okay, so I don't want to put dates there anymore, okay? Let's pretend these are 2 different insurance companies. This one's State Farm, and this one's Allstate. Okay, so did you see that when I changed them here, it changed it down here? Okay, now here's the problem. Let me just highlight this once again. Let's pretend I delete my graph. I made a mistake. I want to start over, and I try to insert the other chart, stock market, and it gives me an error message. Now, in your case, what happened is it will not actually let you press the OK button because you've got a slightly different version than I have. Okay? So you need to understand that if you get this and everything's right, oh yeah, I have to change this back to dates. Now I'm going to highlight this. I'm going to say insert stock. It works fine. I move this over here. I get rid of this. I change this to State Farm and Allstate. Okay. Now the problem is it goes up to 12,000, but what's my, I've got an outlier here at 21,000, right? Okay, so I've got to change my scale. Okay, so what you can do here is if you right click on the vertical scale here, and then you say format axis, then you can change your maximum. I'm going to change that to 20,000. Okay, now I've fixed my scale. I probably should add, you've got a plus sign, I don't have that here. But if you have an older version of Excel, I'll show you how to do this here. If you go to design, no, you go to layout, you go to layout, I forgot here. Your axis titles, I can do a vertical axis title, I want it rotated, and I'm gonna put cost of claims, okay? And then I'm gonna add a chart title that says comparing collision claims, okay? Something like that. All right, so now, what's missing from my box and whisker graph that I drew on the board? The Q2, which is the median, right? So here's how you draw that. If you go over here to insert, if you click on shapes, just pick a line. The median is 1802 in both cases, so you're just gonna eyeball this the best you can. Draw a line there, click a line again. We're gonna draw another line here at about the same spot. Okay, so State Farm, that was the by hand method. So now I'm gonna click on a circle. I'm gonna put in a $21,000 claim here. I'm gonna click on a circle again for the Allstate, and I also got a $21,000 claim, but now I've got 3 outliers over here. So I also need 10,034, which is probably gonna be right on that line. And I need the 9788, which is really close there too. So I'm just gonna draw them both really close. Okay, does that make sense? No? Okay, well, you can watch the video. Class is over. So here's what I'm gonna say. Practice this. So the quiz tomorrow will be, you'll probably draw this by hand, you'll do everything by hand, but next week when we do the test, yeah, I think it will be next week. We're going to, you need to use the computer. So on your homework, practice it on the computer. Don't use the box and whisker maker. Use my method so that when you can do it on the test, it's gonna work, okay? All right, so that's all we have. So quiz tomorrow will be the rest of 3.4 and 3.5. Those really flow together better anyway, I think. I don't know why they put that all together in one section. So we'll see you all tomorrow.